Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Disrupt Film Series. My name is Veronica Medina. I am a trustee with the Museum of Political Corruption and the director of the Disrupt program. Since 2022, we've had the honor to feature impactful documentaries and in-depth discussions about the most urgent political issues of our time. In tonight's discussion, we present yet another critical conversation, one that lies at the very heart of our democracy, the influence of money in politics. As brilliantly exposed by the powerful documentary Dark Money, the role of money in politics is a complex and often contentious issue that shapes the very fabric of our democratic system. In recent years, we have witnessed significant changes in campaign finance laws, notably with the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United. This ruling has allowed for unlimited, undisclosed donations, fundamentally changing the landscape of political fundraising. As a result, we see an increasing reliance on super PACs and dark money groups that operate outside traditional contribution limits. This election cycle alone is set to break records with over $1 billion raised from super PACs, corporations, and foreign influences. All this influx of capital within the electoral process. Candidates with substantial financial backing may dominate media coverage and public discourse, potentially overshadowing grassroots movements that lack similar resources, thus raising important questions about equity, representation, and the integrity of our political processes. In fact, the lack of accountability and transparency about sources of political funding is one of the major reasons behind the public's distrust in politics. As such, Kimberly Reed's film serves as a critical lens through which we can examine the complex interplay between wealth and power. It sheds light on how these financial contributions have the potential to sway elections, shape policies, and ultimately impact the lives of everyday citizens. Let's take a quick look back at the film.
You know, the number one rule of political or watchdog reporting is follow the money.
John Adams here. I covered the legislature for the Great Falls Tribune.
A source of mine had come across something that I might be interested in.
Voters in your district had never seen something.
No, this was a whole new political attack.
They send out all these mailings. They don't care if they lie.
Nobody knows who they are. They call them dark money groups, and that's exactly what they are.
Corporation funnels money to a dark money group. They send out postcards attacking the opponent. When that candidate gets elected, they support the agenda of the corporation. I don't know how to fight them. I can't pick up the phone and say, hey, what's your interest in candidate X? Because I don't know who they are.
And it's not just Montana.
Campaign finance is the gateway to every other issue that you might care about.
Americans are barraged by these political advertisements that are funded by who knows whom. We don't even know if they're domestic.
Politics is just child's play to business. They know how to manipulate the system.
You can buy the politicians, you can buy the judges.
When I first got to the FEC, I thought that we would work together on issues such as disclosure.
If A fails 3-3, Oceans fails 3-3, that fails 3-3.
The FEC will not enforce the law.
New allegations in court against a leading legislator.
What's at stake is whether or not Art Whittick broke Montana campaign finance laws.
Do we care enough to demand that politicians comply with our campaign laws?
The bottom line is, did Whittick know that he was receiving all of these services?
I'm going to call it like I see it. This man cheated.
The people who want to keep dark money have a real problem. The public does not agree with them.
They want a government that works for them. It doesn't work for special interests, doesn't work for political parties, it works for them.
This is scary stuff, but I think this is the proving ground now for the American experiment.
I must say, on behalf of the Museum of Political Corruption, that we are honored to be hosting this conversation, especially considering how close we are to one of the most consequential elections in the United States history. And so we gather here tonight not only to explore the insights presented in this film, but also to engage in a meaningful dialogue, to provide understanding, and to urge all of us to seek solutions. And I encourage everyone here in our audience to ask questions, to comment, and share your perspectives. The stakes are high, and understanding the dynamics at play is vital for fostering a government that truly represents the will of its people. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our panel's moderator, Anna Missoglia. She is editorial and investigations manager at OpenSecrets. Her research areas also include foreign influence and investigations into opaque spending networks, and her writings have been featured in major publications in the US and abroad. Anna holds degrees in political science and psychology from North Carolina State University and a JD from the University of the District of Columbia School of Law. Anna, thank you so much for being here and for leading this important dialogue.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to join for this important discussion. This could not come at a more crucial time in our country and internationally, where we are going into the final weeks of the US elections. I come from OpenSecrets, where we track money in politics. My work has a background in tracking dark money as well as foreign influence. I'm just so thrilled to be here to be able to welcome this amazing panel and have a chance to moderate our discussion. To start, I just want to introduce and share some of the participants' biographies. Just to start with Kimberly Reed, I think she needs no introduction if you've seen the movie, but she's an award-winning film director and producer. She's best known for, of course, for Dark Money, but as well for her docuseries Prodigal Sons, as well as for a variety of newer movies. She's been shortlisted for an Oscar, nominated for Best Documentary of the Year, as well as 4 Critics' Choice Awards. She won the prestigious DuPont Columbia Prize for broadcast journalism, and she's been honored as a filmmaker by many magazines, publications, and just has a long list of accomplishments. I'm so thrilled to have her as a part of this. I'd also like to welcome Mike Monetta, who serves as the Director of Mobilization for American Promise. He has over a decade of experience in the 20th Amendment movement and in working with money in politics. He brings his experience to American Promise and is currently working on a variety of efforts to lobby state houses and participated in dozens of hearings. We're also joined by Drew Sullivan, who is the publisher of the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, or OCCRP, one of the largest investigative journalism organizations in the world. He has won numerous awards for his journalism, and the organization has won several awards under his leadership. He's the co-creator of Floodlight as well, so an initiative that connects investigative reporters with film and television industry to produce informed fiction and in public interest. He was previously an investigative reporter for the Tennessean newspaper and for Associated Press's Special Assignment Project. He was also a structural dynamist, a long history of many accomplishments. I'm so excited to welcome all of them to the discussion tonight and to get a chance to ask them some questions around this film and the issue of dark money generally. I want to give each of them a chance to say their own opening remarks. Kimberly, would you like to kick us off with that?
Yeah, mostly I just want to say thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. It's, on the one hand, as a documentary filmmaker, you want a lot of people to see the film that you made. You want them to see it again and again and again. I would kind of rather not. Every election cycle, this film sort of started to make the rounds again, but that has been a bit of a pattern, unfortunately. I'm glad that we are still confronting it. We still have a lot of work to do. In some ways, it's just, as you heard in the introduction, it's worse than ever. But I couldn't think of any better folks to talk about it. Actually, in the rollout of the film, we had an impact campaign that tried to put the film in the hands of the organizations out there in the field that have been doing and continue to do great work in money and politics. And some of our partners for that impact campaign were OpenSecrets. In fact, the executive director of OpenSecrets appears in the film. An American Promise as well. And I know, Mike, you used to be at Wolfpack. So yeah, I can't imagine a better group of people to discuss this important issue.
Thank you so much. We're so glad to have you here, and I'm just so glad to have a chance to talk with you. Drew, do you want to take it from there with your introduction?
Sure. First of all, I want to congratulate Kimberly for her wonderful film. This is really a topic area that not enough people work in, because it's difficult to work in and it's difficult to understand. And, OCCRP, our experience is global. We are a global investigative reporting organization with reporters in more than 60 countries. And this is something that we've been dealing with in some senses for 20 years. It's different abroad, but it's really the same impact. And I think what we're really dealing with here is a time when we're dealing with nothing less than state capture that's going on. And if you look at places like Hungary, which, is revered by many in the United States in the political right, that is a place where many of these same things started and extended now. And so, you have a situation where you have state capture. So it's a fascinating topic at a fascinating time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Mike, would you like to finish this off with your closing statement?
Sure. Yes. Yes. Got it. I'll echo what Drew said about the film. I had seen it a while ago, Kimberly, but I went back and watched it, obviously, but in advance of this panel, and I was just reminded of how powerful it is. And I think I had the emotion that you want people to have. I was angry by the end of it. It really just exemplifies in so many different ways what's wrong with our government right now. So I think everyone should watch this film. Part of this battle to restore government to the people is education, and people need to know what the core is. And I think you do a really good job of explaining it. So I think, we're at a really pivotal moment here in history, and we need to decide, actually, as a nation, like, are we going to continue to let these shadowy entities, that were described so well in the film, domestic and foreign, who have profit as their driving force rather than the interest of the people? Are we going to allow them to continue to push us around and, control our government? Or are we going to come together, left and right, and everyone in between, to fix this core issue? And that's what we're all about at American Promise. We're coming together in our case to amend the Constitution, add an amendment that allows us to put an end to this dominance of big money, dark money, and foreign money in our elections. So thrilled to be part of this conversation with you all tonight.
Great. We're really excited to have you. I'd love to kick off the discussion with some questions for everyone. Kimberly, just since you're here and the brains behind this amazing movie, I'd love to start with you. I know the film does such an incredible job of shining a light on money in politics and on dark money, and has made such a huge impact. But obviously, dark money hasn't gone away yet. It's still something that we're seeing as a huge problem in our political system. We're seeing more money than ever flowing into 2024 elections already, just based on OpenSecrets numbers. And that's something that we haven't really seen go away. It's just getting a lot more complex. How do you see these issues evolving in today's political landscape, and what still needs to be done?
Yeah, well, in some ways, I think what the film lays out is as pertinent as ever. The interesting thing about what was happening in Montana is that it actually gave us a way to sort of let an audience get your arms around the issue. To really, part of what you do in documentary is education, and hopefully you don't have to do like a bunch of kind of finger wagging explaining to people. Hopefully there are ways that you can find the kind of everyday dramas that we all go through in our lives, and find a situation like that and sort of ride alongside and just tell the story of this happening. And in telling the story of that happening, you kind of introduce and educate folks on how these systems are working. And we were able to do that in Montana. I think the good news is that, we had these postcards, we had all this printed material that became evidence. That became part of the court case that you saw, and enabled people to really track this down and to show how this system works, and to hold some people accountable, it turns out, at the end of the day. The flip side of that is that, campaigning has really changed, to get to your question, Anna. And I think that if we had postcards, crack house in Colorado that we could track down and use as evidence and figure out what was behind the scheme and who was behind it, despite the cloaks that they had out there with these political nonprofits. That doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't happen on Facebook. It doesn't happen certainly on Twitter and TikTok these days. And tracking that has just become so much more complicated. We haven't even started talking about crypto, the amount of kind of crypto support. And, there's a lot of, I think maybe some advantages to blockchain schemes and to use that as a way to actually expose what's going on. But that's a whole other issue. I know we're probably not going to get into that. We're probably not going to sort that out. But just the point is that what we saw in the film was kind of an analog version of how, outside spending can influence an election and remain secret. The digital version is a lot harder to track. So for me, that's the biggest transition since then.
Oh, absolutely. And if anyone else wants to add things, feel free to weigh in. Otherwise, Mike, I'd love for you to discuss some of the 28th Amendment movement that the American Promise has been working on and what progress has been made in that over the last several years.
Yeah, of course. So amending the Constitution obviously takes a little bit of work, right? It's not something you can do overnight. So we've been working at this for, I think, right around 10 years at this point. And so far, you obviously need, for anyone unfamiliar, you need 2/3 of each chamber of Congress to approve an amendment, and then you need 3/4 of the states to approve it. So when you're talking about amending the Constitution, you need incredibly high support, right, across all the entire political spectrum, right? So American Promise was really built to build that really bipartisan movement and allow a space for both parties to come together. And so far, 22 states have called for the amendment. Now that's through the state legislature. That's mostly how it's done. That's both chambers, a state Senate and a state House, passing a resolution saying that they're calling on Congress to propose an amendment to deal with this issue, right? To deal with money in politics. And you can also go through citizen initiative. So some states have done that. So Maine is an example of a state who just recently passed a ballot initiative to close a foreign money loophole in their state. And that passed overwhelmingly. In fact, every time it goes to the voters, and I believe Montana was one of the very first that did it through citizen initiative, it passes, 70, 80% or higher. I think Maine was actually right around 87% of the public said, yes, of course, we want to solve this problem. So the support is there, right? But now we just need to continue to get support in the legislature of the state houses and in Congress, because that's the only way you can get an amendment. And we need an amendment because the Supreme Court has just doubled down. They keep going in the wrong direction. It's not a viable avenue to say the Supreme Court is going to change course. So the only way to correct that, to go above that, is to amend the Constitution. And that is what American Promise is doing. We are pushing for our Freedom Amendment, which is really logical, I think, and bipartisan in nature. It just simply says that Congress and the states have the power, but are not required to pass reasonable laws if they choose to, with regarding campaign finance reform. So, and I've been doing this for a long time. I've been in hundreds of meetings at the state level. And the one thing I just kept hearing from legislators over and over again is like, that's the type of amendment that they want. I remember being in Pennsylvania talking to a state senator, and he said, I would support that type of amendment because what works here in Pennsylvania might not work in, Oklahoma or Hawaii, and vice versa, right? So it's a very straightforward amendment. 22 states, most of those all have been Democratically controlled. So we're actually making a very big effort to bring more Republican-controlled states into the mix. So we're working in states like Arizona. We feel like the support is there. It's just going to take a little bit more time. And then, we're going to get there. We actually feel, we've got a fairly aggressive timeline here. We think that if political climate is right over the next few years, we can get it proposed by July 4th, 2026, which would be the 250th anniversary of our founding, right? So that's what we're aiming for. And we also feel like we're running out of time. I mean, this is urgent, right? Like I said, I think we have a choice here. These powers, these really shadow entities are very organized, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. So it's a limited window here we have to be able to organize and actually fight back and win, right? I'm extremely optimistic that we will, though, by the way. But the numbers are staggering. Like, I actually just saw a message from one of our a research coordinator at American Promise today, quoting OpenSecrets, saying that the numbers just came out, I think, right? New numbers, and it's already like double what it was. And it's like, surprise, surprise, it's double again, right? Every election it seems to double. So it's just, we're going in the wrong direction, and we got to fix this.
No, thank you so much. That's great to hear our numbers being cited. I feel like there's so much new information coming out constantly at this point in the election cycle. You also made a really great point about different states having different needs and different issues. There really isn't a one-size-fits-all reform necessarily at this point due to the varying issues that different states have. And I think that's something that really applies internationally to some extent as well, that we're seeing different issues across the globe. Dark money isn't just something that is unique to U.S. money and politics, and it's happening at now a global level as well. We're seeing it not just in politics, but also criminal enterprises and in a variety of issues internationally. Drew, I'd love to move over to you and hear a little bit more about how you see the intersection of political finances, corruption, organized crime, and just opacity really shaping issues at an international level.
Yeah, this is really the golden age of aggregated money. You have this unholy alliance of, libertarian billionaires, tech bros, organized crime, foreign governments, dirty businesses, and they've all found common cause in undermining democracy because it helps them. And this is profoundly, plutocratic money. It's been laundered into American hedge funds where it's protected, and it can go out as blue-blooded, American investment, or, contributions to these political parties. So we have no idea where this money is coming from, but I guarantee you significant parts of it are coming from Sinaloa drug cartel, and the Russian state and the Chinese state and other places. And we just have zero visibility into this issue, and that's the problem for some of the reasons that Kimberly mentioned. And so you really have, everybody is playing with American democracy right now. And they're using, many of the play cards. When we went into Russia in the early 1990s, we went there to change Russia into this, democracy and this, capitalist country. And what we don't really realize is that Russia changed us. Many of the systems we're seeing, many of the techniques we're seeing come from old Russian playbooks. It comes from the Chinese playbooks. And really, it's this combination of concentrated money, bribery. Bribery is quite, people are cheap. They're really cheap. You can buy politicians for like $20,000. It's not like you're paying them millions of dollars. Bribery, propaganda, extremely sophisticated. You're seeing this in this election, just gargantuan amounts of propaganda that are just going on incessantly. And this is all paid for by dark money. It's the new version of the things passed out in the mailboxes that Kimberly was looking at. This is really problematic because what everybody agrees on are things that have led to state capture in other places. You're seeing corruption of the election systems. You're seeing people who are coordinated coming into positions of power, like in the film, the FEC commissioners. It's the same thing in Georgia now with the election commissioners. And you'll see that in other places all the time where coordinated people are coming in. They're extremely well funded. They're extremely organized. And what they're doing is they're packing government with loyalists. They're attacking and crippling law enforcement and regulators, compromising the courts. They're killing off independent journalism wherever they can. They're creating these right-wing media monopolies. They're allocating state resources back to the parties. They're locking in their power by changing the laws. And those are all the elements of state capture. And so, we may be thinking about, well, this is about getting elections or getting, some particular corporation to get an advantage. But no, it really now is about state capture. These are the same tools that are used in state capture, and that's the real danger.
Thank you. No, all really great points. And one of the things that you touched on that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, just given all the news today about Eric Adams in New York getting indicted for allegedly taking bribes from foreign actors, doing all of this in secret behind the scenes.
Robert Menendez, I mean, it's
exactly. No, you took the words out of my mouth. I was saying this isn't really the first indictment we've seen in recent months. We're seeing many different lawmakers, policymakers, big figures who many might have thought in the past were invincible at this point, actually getting held to account to some extent. Do you all, and this is kind of more of a question for the whole panel, and Drew, feel free to jump in, or anyone else, but do you think that there is now a move towards more enforcement of these issues?
Well, I mean, I think yes, but the problem is that not all the tools are there. I mean, it's very difficult to track this dark money, and people are being sloppy and they're making mistakes. But if you're really good about this, it's almost impossible to track this. And I guarantee you, it's a much more significant problem than you're seeing. I can name politicians who I think are assets of foreign countries, and journalists who are assets of foreign countries. When people exactly match Russian disinformation, literally word for word for word for word, that is an indication that they are bought and paid for. And we can't prove it because we just don't, law enforcement doesn't have the tools. It's very difficult to get a mutual legal aid assistance treaty, documentation from Russia or from China or from other places. So, we're catching like 2%, it's far worse than is showing right now.
Wow. Well, the only thing I'll add to that is it's not like they want to do it, I would imagine, right? Like these politicians now are trapped in this just terrible system, right? And where it's just an arms race, and the money that they have to raise to win these campaigns is just so out of control. We've seen statistics where they spend up to 70% in Congress of their time raising money, right? I mean, they have to literally leave the Capitol building because it's illegal to raise money there, and go across the street and just dial for dollars like telemarketers, right? That's the system that we currently have. So that's another reason why I'm optimistic, though, is because I don't think even the people that are in the system want to be in the system. I don't think Congress wants their Congress people want to do that. That sucks. I mean, to have to raise money that way. So we can come together and fix, let's get an amendment, from our perspective, and then start testing some solutions where you don't have to spend 70% of your time raising money, or, allowing these shadowy entities to funnel money into our elections from, out of the country and across state lines. It's totally out of control.
Well, I think there's two things that's happening here. One, we're getting a much lower level of politician. They're actually recruiting crooks, because, they're more amenable to these things. And the other thing is, this is the solution to their problem. They'll get the money that they need. It'll keep coming in, and they won't need to raise as much money. It'll come in these, 501c4s that give them, tremendous amounts of money. And that's really where the problem is that, if the system is getting corrupted. And so the people who are involved in it are increasingly corrupted, and that's part of the state capture, method is to bring your people in. That's the Plan 2025. That's part of that. It's to replace everybody with loyalists, and that's where you get the problems.
And it really doesn't have to be that way. There's been so many unusual things about this election cycle, but one of the just delightful things is to have everybody realize that our elections don't have to be as long as they are. They don't have to be as expensive as they are. We don't have to be, subject to capture by just a financial system that we all seem to have gotten used to, and kind of always sort of assume that that's just the way it's got to be. It doesn't have to be like that. And, I also wanted to pick up on another very important issue of this state capture that Drew is talking about, and that's the collapse of the free press, the collapse of journalism. And at the risk of sounding a little bit Pollyannish, because it is grim out there, the consolidation, since what you see in the film, has continued to happen over and over again. I think all of us probably have a sense over the last 5 years of just the collapses that have happened, the mergers that have happened. I did want to update folks on something that happened in the movie. So John Adams, guy living out of his truck trying to start a nonprofit news service, has been extremely successful. I think John would be the first to say that, when he goes, he's actually quite a representative in the nonprofit news world these days, talking about how he started up Montana Free Press. And I think he would be the first to say that the way to start a nonprofit news organization is to get a documentary filmmaker to follow you around for a couple of years and to tell your story, because that, it's maybe not the best case study because of that. John's motivations and, everything that drives him is incredibly sincere. And I like to think that had as much to do with it as the film did, shining this spotlight on him. But he's been very successful. In fact, one of the proudest moments is to see John inspiring other news organizations in other places, and it really is a model that's replicable. And there is some interesting work that's being done in just funding models, aside from a billionaire buying a newspaper, which sometimes kind of glad that they did so it doesn't go under. But still, look at how beholden people are to that billionaire tech bro who happened to buy it. But yeah, that I just want to, that's why people like Drew are so important. That's why organizations like OpenSecrets and American Promise are so important, to keep this attention on money and pot, because you can't really solve the problem without training that spotlight on it. And it's the free press and organizations like you see tonight that are doing it.
Plus, a really good name for a reporter in this covering this issue too, right?
Yeah, it was a little bit on the nose. If I had written that, I wouldn't have gotten away with that.
Yeah, it is the golden age, though, of investigative reporting. A lot of reporters have lost their jobs at news organizations, and they've gone out and they've created these small organizations, and that's what we do. We work with these small organizations and bring them all together and resource them and give them everything that they need, and then work with them on collaborative cross-border stories. But there's a tremendous amount of innovation. There's a tremendous amount of really good people doing great work. The problem still is that a lot of the well-resourced, it's that the big networks and others. And you can see things like, Sinclair and others, coalescing around this kind of right-wing sphere of media. There's a bunch of, large organizations like Gannett where we don't really know who owns them. They're a couple hundred newspapers or 100 newspapers, and nobody knows who owns them. It's some hedge fund. And they could be anybody's money behind that. So, the big media is going to always be, very powerful, and it's going to be influential. And that's how in places like Hungary, Orban was able to capture the state. It was because he had his oligarchs buy out, the major media. And that's something we really need to keep an eye on in the United States. There'll always be great, small, investigative organizations, but we also need the large distribution, although the whole industry is fractured now, and everything's fractured in information, which is making it hard to really get any cohesive message out anywhere anymore.
No, that's a great point about the role, I think, of journalists within this whole system, that even when the government isn't necessarily doing all the work that's needed to get the information out to uncover some of these efforts, I think journalists play a significant role in that, and potentially spurring government investigations and providing them with some of the information needed to actually start that enforcement, to push to end up using those as tools for reform. So it's a great point with that. One other area I'd love to chat to kind of get your takes on is the evolution of dark money and partisanship. One of the real challenges I know that we've seen in the past to have reforms is one side or the other has taken issues with various bills Traditionally, and for many years, we saw dark money supporting conservative candidates, but that took a shift around the 2018 cycle. And now we're seeing money pouring in to support Democrats, Republicans, both sides of the aisle. Is this something that you think will make it easier to address dark money and these issues, since both sides are now benefiting from it? Or is it something that's making it more difficult? I know American Promise has done some work kind of trying to appeal to lawmakers, policymakers on both sides of the aisle. Is there a message that really resonates across the board?
Yeah, for sure. There's no question that that is playing a big role, actually. And, I'd mentioned before the 22 states that have officially called through their legislatures are mostly democratically controlled. We are seeing a shift there where Republicans are starting to take notice. Oh, the Democrats can raise money too, right? Because it was a little lopsided for a while. But now it's even, and the Democrats might even be out raising them actually in dark money, are benefiting more from it, right? So it's absolutely becoming an issue with both parties, and in fact, I love the example in the film. Going back to the film, the Jeff Welburn, I think was his name, representative of Montana, and he was. I couldn't believe that story. That was one of the ones that made me the most upset, actually. I think anybody, no matter what party you're in, if you watch that just 10 minutes of the film, will get your blood boiling, right? That was just a reminder. He was basically being threatened because he wouldn't sign a card saying he would reject the Medicaid expansion bill, right? And all he said to them when this group, and the shadowy group, asked him to sign this pledge, was that he wanted to wait to listen to the debate and then make up his mind. That was his stance. That is literally the definition of what a functioning democracy should be, right? That's what our government is supposed to do. Listen to both sides and then make up your mind. And that's what he said he was going to do. And because he said that, he didn't even say he wouldn't vote one way or another. He didn't even say. He said he wanted to listen to the debate. They came after him, and they threatened him. And there's an example of that town hall where they weren't even allowing him to speak. He came, and they weren't allowing the public to speak either, right? So I think the more and more people see these things, I think they're going to be like, oh wow, this is a disaster on both sides. But just to give you one more example of the bipartisanship, this year we do a candidate pledge program as one of our focused core activities that we do. Our volunteers really help us to do that. They go in their districts, talk to their candidates running for office at all levels of government. And we had a goal of 500 candidate pledges this year, and previously it was I think 320, and we beat it. We over 500 pledges this year, and it's pretty even as far as Democrats and Republicans signing on this year. And I think the message that we're putting out there is kind of conservative in its nature with this amendment. Honestly, it's the 4-Hour Freedom Amendment, and it's really just kind of seeped in federalism, right? We're saying we're not going to dictate that there has to be limits. We're saying that each state should be able to decide on their own. They should each have the freedom, like they once did, right? And then without the Supreme Court basically just saying, no, you can't. And there's lots of examples of that, right? Of state legislation or ballot initiatives that the people keep asking for, and the Supreme Court just keeps saying, no, you can't have it. You can't have your own laws, right? And that's I think the overall thing that makes you the most mad about the dark money film is, Montana had, and by the way, I've used that example for the entire time I've been doing this campaign, for 10 years or more, because it's just it makes it so crystal clear what's happening, right? Montana was one of the first states affected by corruption and big money, and they had really good laws, right? They had 100 years of common sense campaign finance laws, and they wanted to keep them, just as simple as that. They just wanted to keep laws that were working for them, and the Supreme Court came in and said you can't keep them, right? So when you make that argument, to conservatives, they're like, oh yeah, I mean, we're on board for that. So yeah, it's just a matter of time. We're gonna bring both sides together. We're gonna get this done.
Thank you. And Kimberly, since the documentary came up again, I want to give you a chance to respond to that as well. Just kind of go one more round just to give everyone a chance to respond to this. And then I think we're going to move on to questions from the audience. If you had anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, I mean, just to get to the kind of the partisan nature of it, one of the things that was important to me with the documentary is to not let it just break down on partisan lines, because even there it was clear this is not just a partisan issue. I mean, the broad swath of Americans just think we should know where money in our political system is coming from, and they want to have that transparency. But it was one of the things that was interesting about the situation in Montana is you had this internecine split in the Republican Party, so that they were Republicans talking about other Republicans, and that enabled us to just kind of tell the story in a way that pulled partisanship out of it a little bit. Things have changed since then. Yeah, there's more spending on both sides. I always think it's more important to, at the end of the day, like who's trying to fix the problem, instead of, just pointing at everybody else. There is a lot of pointing going on, and as kind of ugly and cynical as that sometimes gets, I do actually think it's a good sign, because you will see people on the right and the left pointing at each other and saying, that's dark money, that's dark money, that's dark money. And I have to think that, like, as cynical as it is, that, it's actually going to raise the awareness. And it, once again, makes it clear that the broad swath of the American public doesn't support dark money, and really wants that transparency. And hopefully we'll be able to accomplish the things that Mike is talking about with the 20th Amendment.
Great. Thank you so much. And we'll have another chance for more closing remarks later after the audience questions. But with that, I know we're coming up on the time, or a little over the time we needed to shift over. So I think we're going to get started on audience questions at this point. Thank you all so much. So one question coming up from iMatsur. It says, this is such a complex problem. Are there strategies that have proven effective for engaging audiences on complex topics like dark money and corruption?
Okay, I'll jump in on that. Sure. I can't speak so much to all of the ins and outs. I'm not a lawyer. We have brilliant lawyers at American Proms that can probably do that part of it. But I can speak more to just bringing them into the issue as a whole. And I think it just comes down to explaining things in a really simple way. At American Promise, we have an onboarding process. So if you're interested in getting involved, you would go through, it's just a very simple 10, 15-minute orientation where we just go through some basic slides and just explain the situation, in the simplest way that we possibly can, and that's a lot of what we've just talked about here, just broken down, condensed maybe into 10 minutes of, here's the deal. Because I think people get it, right? I mean, people understand instinctively, like, this system is broken. You don't really need to make that case too much to them. From what I've seen, they just need to know, we've faced really big challenges before, and we absolutely can come together and amend our Constitution to fix them. In fact, that's the way our government is designed, right? It's literally designed so that if we see big, obvious problems, that we can unite and come together and just take really small actions. That's another part of it, I think, is making sure people have just really bite-sized, simple things that they can do in their community to either spread the word, go do a presentation in your community, or meet with your legislators, right? Just talk to them about this issue. But for us, it's kind of simple because we're just focusing on one thing, right? So we don't usually get into all the ins and outs. Maybe someone else can take that one. Maybe Drew, you can answer that better than I can as far as the complexities.
Yeah, really. I mean, one of the problems is, we're dealing in a time there's a tremendous amount of propaganda. The thing to look forward to, or to be optimistic about, is that, as a couple of people have said before, 90% of all Americans are behind this. They want to see change. They want to get dark money out. They want to see a democracy, but what's happening is there's so much propaganda. And propaganda is not designed necessarily to convince someone. It's designed to basically make them hopeless, to feel that there's nothing they can do about it, to be too confused by the whole process. This is not as complex as it sounds. This is just bad money being hidden and then getting into the system. And so really it is about people, putting down, they're taking sides and agreeing that on this one issue, we really need to work together to do this, and to really not be allured into the propaganda the hate, the other things that they want you to get into, so that you just don't really clear-headedly think about this issue. And that's going to take, I think it's very effective now, but I think in 4 years it'll be less effective, and in 8 years it'll be even less effective propaganda. And I think people will start to understand, who's behind these systems and why they're doing it. And so I think it just is going to take a certain amount of time. It's going to take a lot of journalists working. It's going to take a lot of civil society groups working. It's going to take, honest politicians on both sides of the aisle standing up and speaking out on this. And I think, it's going to take protecting, the moderate ring of the Republican Party, which is really in a very challenging situation right now. They're trying to drum them all out of the party, so that they can just get extremists in, and that's got to lose. But if it wins, then I think the Republican Party will lose in general, because I don't think people are going to really go for this forever. This is an opportunity for the dark forces, and if we can get through these elections comfortably, then I think it'll be much harder in 4 years.
Another thing, just to pick up really quickly on that, is, in some ways, dark money is very complex. It's very hard to figure out what's going on. But I think that the question mentioned dark money and corruption as being these complex, intractable issues. And if you just think about corruption, like, everybody knows what that is. It's a story as old as human history. People get it. And people are against that. And so in some ways, it's just quite simple. That's all we have to do, is to point, here we go again. It happened today in New York. It happened a month ago, right across the river, right across the Hudson River. So it's a story as old as time.
Yeah, and just to add to that, a really simple way of explaining it is something that we say when we're going out, canvassing or talking to voters, is, how do you feel about, foreign influence in our elections? Are you okay with, foreign entities being able to influence our elections? And that one, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, people are like, hell no, right? So you can always break it down in one sentence that way, and someone will get it and be like, oh yeah, I want to fix that. We got to put an end to that.
That's a great point. Just kind of making something that's really complex, not so complex, and finding what brings people together, that there are always going to be those issues people do agree on. And so I think that's such a great point across the board from all of you. Let's see if we have any more questions from the audience. Here we go from Marcia Costa. Hi, how can we effectively combat dark money in politics when it often feels so entrenched in our systems, and some argue that candidates may feel they need it to get elected?
So I mean, one thing that we haven't mentioned is transparency. I mean, transparency is incredibly important. The old saying in journalism is that, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And there's no reason that there should be, any kind of protection of who is giving money to a political cause or a political candidate. And we just have to pass laws to create much greater transparency. Transparency not only in the contribution process, but in who owns American businesses, who owns property, who owns assets in this country. We have a history of being transparent, and that's been eroded in the last 20 years or so, under the guise of, bad people are trying to get your, home address. It was a scare tactic that was used against people. And in reality, transparency, is a very, very powerful tool that empowers journalists and empowers activists to really, be effective. So that, I think, is one of the keys to any strategy.
Yeah, and then just to add to that, it's a tough one, by the way. I mean, that's one of the realities that we face, right, in this campaign, is you do have people in office, especially some of the ones that are higher up, in office, that have power. They tend to get a lot more money, so it becomes more difficult. And then a lot of times they control legislation. So there's no question that this is a tough one, and we do have to address it. But it really comes back to citizenry, right? Being active citizens. If you have enough people wanting a change, and we can unite around it, and we make sure we demand it, then we can actually win that way. Because at the end of the day, we actually are still casting votes, right? The money is obviously a huge factor, but if we can organize in a way where we make this like a central issue, we basically have to force them, in some cases. There are lots of good legislators out there still. I don't know how long it's going to last, Drew. Like you said, this is sort of, going in the wrong direction. It becomes more and more every election cycle. But right now, there are a lot of good lawmakers out there right now. So it's a combination of finding those ones that are willing to stand up with the people on this, and others, forcing them through just people power, right? Just organizing people and saying, hey, no, we demand that you support this, this issue. We've got to fix it. We want you to support this amendment, in our case. But there's no question it's a challenge.
Absolutely. I think one of the arguments I've seen from people on both sides of the aisle is you have to fight fire with fire when it comes to dark money, but really it's just feeding the fire from what we've seen. It's just making it worse, people building off of what these other new tactics are. And it just takes someone to really initiate that change. I think it's just such an important first step of taking that step to be responsible to your constituents, to your grassroots donors, making sure that there is that step taken. I think it's hard to happen, but I think that there are some great folks out there who hopefully are going to lead the charge.
And it's a pretty popular issue to run on, especially in the purplish states where, John Tester has done it again and again, as you saw in the film. That happens in a lot of close races in red candidates in blue states or vice versa. People support it. It's a populist issue.
Yeah, it sure is. You can win elections on it if you're front and center with it, and that's your issue. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. You can run on that. And just one more to follow up on your point, Drew, about transparency. Another benefit of going the amendment route and getting an amendment that basically says the states can now experiment with the laws that are going to work best for them, is that they are going to be different. One state might say we just want to do really strong transparency. Another state, let's say Wyoming wants to do really strong transparency and they want to know where the money's coming from. Maybe Vermont wants to go a little bit stronger and they want to have some type of citizen funded elections. Right now we can't. Neither of those are safe, right? So there are examples of even transparency. We thought at one point we might be able to get that, and that's safe even without an amendment. But it's actually looking like it's not going to be the case now. The Supreme Court is now stepping in, and there are certain cases where they're starting to say that there's a First Amendment right now for people not to know who you are, right? Or it's really out of control. So even transparency is not actually safe without an amendment at this point, right? So I can't wait personally. I like I said a few times, I really believe it is going to happen. I'm really excited for that step, to see what the states can actually enact. And there's over 20 states that had really strong laws that the Supreme Court basically struck down with these court rulings. So, we can bring some of those back, but maybe even do better, than we did in the past. That's the whole point of our country, is constantly evolving, right? And seeing how we can, address these issues and make it work better.
And, Congress created super PACs and all these, variants of it, and they can get rid of them too. And there should be a demand that happen as well. So, there are some legislation that you can put in that could make it much more difficult to do the types of things that are happening. And there's a lot of small legislations that can be done that can do that. And those need to be creatively done all the time. And, there needs to be more ideas and sharing of ideas on what's worked. And, that's going to take time.
Thank you all. I think we've got a few more audience questions to take before moving on. From Frank Vogel, how do we trace rising dark money flows through cryptocurrencies?
So it's actually not that difficult. Cryptocurrencies are built on the blockchain, and the blockchain is, transparent. You can see who wired money to who. You don't often know, whose wallet it is. You also don't necessarily, there's Monetta and some other cryptocurrencies that are, less transparent. And then there's increasingly state level cryptocurrencies in places like Russia and China and other places that are designed, to be non-transparent. So, as long as, those that are non-transparent can be outlawed to a certain extent. And then you can trace through cryptocurrencies, and we've done it. And it's a matter of aggregating wallets to see the flow between certain wallets and who they're dealing with, and you can figure out, if you've got a right-wing group or you've got a criminal group, and you can often connect it to that. So you just often don't know exactly who it is the problem, but that it's a criminal wallet, and that's the problem with cryptocurrencies.
Great point. Thank you. No, that's nice to know it's at least something that we can track to some extent. I feel like there's always that brick wall you can hit, but at least to some extent, the difference between that or cash exchanging hands physically, I think can be at least, it is something that there are records of, I think is at least a step in that direction.
Yeah, and the U.S. has passed new laws on ultimate beneficial owner, and there needs to be more laws on restricting non-transparent offshore companies from doing business without exposing who their ultimate beneficial owner is. So there are a lot of things you can do to push those types of avenues out, and those have been protected by businesses because it's a common U.S. business practice to store all your debt offshore and all the people you're bribing to push that money offshore, and do those types of things. You see that when you're in investigative reporting all the time. American businesses use the offshore industry as kind of a dumping ground of their dirty laundry. And there needs to be a lot that needs to be cleaned up on that. We're making progress on it, I think, though.
Yeah, and that question, such an important question. I brought up the whole crypto thing. It can get frustrating to be a voter and to bump into that lack of, that final wall you run into. But nothing is to say that you can't hold your elected officials accountable, that you can't be asking of them, like, where is your funding coming from? That's why organizations like OpenSecrets are so important. You can actually go there and track it and see who's contributing to them. It's a very good question to ask your elected officials when you're meeting with them, especially in public, is like where their money is coming from, and holding them accountable based on where you see their influences lying. So in other words, instead of, trying to do away with all crypto, if you focus on the crypto bros who are, donating to the politicians, that's the other way to hold. You just hold them accountable from the other side of the equation.
Absolutely. And I think crypto money in general is something we've really seen flowing into election cycles in a very traceable way, as well as, of course, behind the scenes, where we're looking at major cryptocurrency investment firms now funding their entire super PACs. That's been one of the biggest things that we've really followed during the 2024 cycle in a very open way as well. And so it's hard to know how much is happening behind the scenes, but that's certainly been a trend just overall with what we've seen going in. And I think we are coming up on time with the audience questions. I would love to move over to, I don't think we have time for one more question. I think it would be great to just move over to a round of final remarks before we close out. Thank you all so much for coming and doing all of this. This has been such an informative conversation. For me, it's always really nice when the focus is so positive, where instead of coming away feeling disheartened, like there's nothing that can be done, that it's just getting worse, that you all have really highlighted some amazing reforms and efforts and ways that we are either making progress or can make progress. And that's just such an uplifting thing for me. I know that we still have a long way to go, obviously, with approaching dark money, with the tools that are needed in order to even just trace some of these funds. But it's really great to hear just how much is going on and to hear people actually motivated by this and to make those changes. So that's just absolutely fantastic. Drew, do you want to get us started with final remarks?
Sure. When we focus just on dark money, which is a huge problem, I think we miss, though, a larger issue, which is that America itself has, for the last 30 years to 40 years, become increasingly plutocratic. There are systems that are basically in place that favor wealth over non-wealth, and wealth is more powerful than the people. And that's what we've pushed into our system. So we really have to tackle all those things. We need fairness, we need social justice, we need economic justice. We need to push for these types of things as well. And I think most Americans believe that. I think a large number of Americans feel that they have been left out and they're right. That their way of living has been destroyed and they're right. And these are not just, these are not just economic issues. These are also, fundamental issues dealing with technology. I mean, 80% of all jobs can be replaced by technology nowadays, and it's just a matter of capital investment. And if it's just a matter of capital investment, then those with the money can make that capital investment, and those without will never do. And so they'll never change. The situation will just get more and more lopsided. And that's really one of these issues. This is a manifestation of that. So we have to work on these larger issues of economic justice in our society.
Thank you so much. Mike, do you want to give your final remarks as well?
Yeah, sure thing. So the main point that I would like to leave anyone with is, I know it's really easy to feel despair because this is, it's a pretty low point, for our elections in this country. But we look at it at American Promise as really as an opportunity, an opportunity for us to engage as citizens, really a call to action, and that's what we're doing here. The amendment, in my opinion, is going to happen. So it's really an opportunity to be a part of something very big and very amazing. And I also want to remind people that amending the Constitution is something that we do, because I think we forget, right? Like it's been a while, it's been a long time since we've amended the Constitution in any kind of a meaningful way. But there have been multiple moments in American history when constitutional amendments have been adopted to reflect the evolution of our society and our values, right? We adopted the Bill of Rights shortly after the founding. In the wake of the Civil War, we passed amendments to correct the injustice of slavery. In the Progressive Era, we passed amendments to include women's suffrage. In the wake of Jim Crow and the Vietnam War, we strengthened civil rights, right? So amending the Constitution is something that we do and we're supposed to do. And I think, so that's what we're doing here at American Promise. And we'd love for you to be part of it with us, because we are at another one of these constitutional moments when we all see a need for change, right? We all see a need for it, and really big change, something that requires an amendment, actually. So I'll leave you with those thoughts, and I will drop a link in the chat if anyone does want to volunteer, take action. We'd love to have you.
Thank you so much. And Kimberly, would you like to close us out with your thoughts as well?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for this great discussion. It's been an honor to be part of it and to have our film shown again. And, I would invite people. One of the things we are trying to do with the film is to just hand it back over, as I was saying, to different organizations. And we also really went to great extent to make it an educational tool. So if you saw this and you're inspired by this and you want to share it with others, perhaps you're an educator. We actually wrote a whole lesson plan that has clips from the film that kind of plug into lesson plans so that you can disseminate this information. And if you go to darkmoneyfilm.com, I'll put a link in the chat as well. But there's a whole section about how you can get involved, links to the different organizations like OpenSecrets and American Promise that were our partners with the rollout, and all sorts of educational resources that you can do to kind of turn this back over. I guess I would just close with something that came up tonight. In some ways, it does seem discouraging, and it can be despairing. There was some hints of despair in some of those questions of like, what do we do? How can we fix this? But yeah, at the end of the day, the issues are quite simple. We do understand what corruption is. We don't want it. We want this sort of transparency in our system. I think Drew's point about these larger issues of economic justice are so important and so well taken, because the farther we go down this road to plutocracy and oligarchy and just having the moneyed interests, usually corporations, that are controlling it, the harder it is to get it back. So I encourage you to get involved with some of these organizations and check out these educational resources on our site.
Thank you so much. I couldn't have put it better with having educational resources as a part of this. I think that's such a crucial part that it hadn't come up as much during the call, because even when we are waiting for reforms and waiting for things to happen, having more media literacy, informing people, giving power back to the people who are consuming information from dark money groups can really take the power away from them, even in the meantime. And I think that's just such an amazing point. It has been such an honor to be able to moderate this panel, to be able to ask all of you questions, and just to talk with all of you tonight. Thank you so much for all of this. A huge thank you to everyone who put this together. And I know we have a few other, another closing with Veronica, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Anna, so much for this. And thank you to our panelists. A huge thanks to Kimberly, Drew, and Mike for such an informative and eye-opening conversation. I really appreciate you guys sharing your knowledge and your insights here with us tonight. And please do share any materials, links, anything that you guys have. Let's create like a call to action to our constituents, to our audience. So please do share that and make sure to follow it through to our audience. So thanks. And I also want to thank all of you, our amazing audience, for being here with us tonight and for engaging with our guests. I hope you've all enjoyed this presentation, and I hope to see you all here again in our future events. And speaking of future events, I would like to leave a special invitation for our followers that are in the New York's capital region to join us in Albany on Sunday, October 13th, as we host our annual Nellie Bly Award for Investigative Reporting. This year, we are honoring the ProPublica journalism team that exposed the shadow world of gifts and access among Supreme Court justices. And in our in-person meet and greet reception will be held at the WAMC's Theater de Linda, and we will present a provocative discussion featuring members of the ProPublica team, along with Brendan Lyons of the Times Union and Julie Novkov, Dean of the Rockefeller College of Public Affairs and Policy. And the discussion will be moderated by WAMC's Rex Smith. The tickets are on sale now via Eventbrite, and the links down below in our description box. There's also the QR code for you here on your screen. And it's going to be an amazing event. So if you are in or around Albany, please join us. You don't want to miss this event. And as for our Disrupt Film series, we will be back here on December 9th, International Anti-Corruption Day, for our last event of the season. And we will present an exclusive discussion of PBS as a citizen's guide to preserving democracy. Here's a quick preview of the film.
Spectator sport. Democracy requires people to suit up and get on the field.
It doesn't matter whether or not you're Republican, Democratic, Independent, whether you're in the Green Party, it doesn't really matter as long as you're here for America to be better.
And we resonate to the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who and I'll paraphrase, who said, we hate each other because we fear each other, and we fear each other because we don't understand each other, and we don't understand each other because we don't talk to each other. And our goal with this Great Lakes Civility Project is to get people to talk to each other.
And that's what I love about the service I'm involved in Iowa through the American Connection Corps. It's precisely that, it's connection. And when you can connect people together, that connection takes on a life of its own.
We are here for New York City Civics Day. It's kind of like the Super Bowl of civics.
I love the idea of having more people who are younger to be involved in democracy, because this is going to be our future.
This is for the people, right? It's a public place. The common good of being able to reach people, the common good of being able to reintroduce the library to people who potentially may have thought that it wasn't for them.
Hey Renee, welcome in. We had over 300 people come to our events when we were collecting ideas. We collected over 1,300 ideas for how this money should be spent.
Very first time that the city of Evanston is doing it, making sure that all voices were being heard.
I think the stakes are huge. Whether we succeed or not is going to say a lot about the future of democracy and how successful this democracy is going to be for generations.
We will have all the details about this event available for you soon. So please follow us and stay tuned for this and other announcements about our upcoming programming. And so with that, we wish you all a good night. Thank you, and we will see you soon.